Welcome back, StewHeads, to another episode of Remnant Stew. I'm your host, Leah.
And I'm Steve. Today's episode is called Submarines and War Machines. You may fire when ready.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Well, we're delighted to have in studio with us again my cousin from England, Juliet. Juliet, say hello.
Hello.
Hi, Juliet.
Juliet has been
Welcome
visiting
back.
us.
Thanks.
Has been visiting us here in Texas, and we've been having a great time with her. Well, let's look at the calendar. We are nearing the end of May now, and there are always some interesting holidays to talk about. And this is really a great one. May 24th, International Tiara Day. Yes, that's Tiara, International Tiara Day.
Well,
Proud.
I think that's a Texas pronunciation. But I think it's tiara.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Tiara.
You probably
Tiara.
said it more correct. How would you say that, Juliet?
Tiara.
Tiara.
That's
Okay,
right.
I stand corrected. This holiday was created in 2005 by Barbara Bellissimo of Seasons of Success. Ladies, do you know the feeling you get when you put a tiara on your head?
Yes.
It's a great feeling. That's right, you feel like royalty. A tiara transforms you into the queen, princess, or duchess hidden inside every woman or girl. If you do not come from nobility, you may never have the chance to wear a tiara before today. Opportunities and events where a tiara is worn are few and far between. But International Tiara Day was created so you can experience this joyous feeling today.
Even going to HEB.
This is an annual holiday, so you can now wear a tiara at least once a year. So,
and we are recording this episode in
With
our tiaras.
tiaras, yes, we are. We'll have a
Phil's really
picture-
rocking it.
Have
It
a picture
itches a
on our
bit.
website. Well, now May 26th is an important holiday. I remember when this person became notable. It's Sally Ride Day.
Yay.
Sally.
Yes.
Sally Ride Day honors America's first woman astronaut to go, first woman to go into space. In fact, Dr. Ride accomplished this feat as a mission specialist aboard STS-7, the second flight of the Space Shuttle Challenger. STS-7 was launched from Kennedy Space Center, Florida, on June 18, 1983. The day is celebrated on Dr. Ride's birthday, so happy birthday, Dr. Sally Ride.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Now,
birthday.
now, was she the first woman in... She wasn't the first woman in space.
First
She
American
was the first
woman
American
in space.
woman
Yeah,
in
I think the
space,
Russians
yes.
did send a woman cosmonaut before. Now, this is one of my favorite holidays, and Phil, yours as well, I'm sure. May 28th, National Hamburger Day.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Are hamburgers popular in England, too?
Yes. Maybe
Okay.
not as much as here.
Well, it kind of was our invention, so...
That's what she said about chocolate chips, too. So, what are you saying, Juliet?
Well, they have fish and chips. So,
They
you know.
definitely need a Whataburger. I'm just saying.
Hamburgers are an American favorite sandwich. What would Memorial
That's
Day
true.
or a 4th of July picnic be without the very American hamburger? So it's only fitting that we have one special day to celebrate our cherished burgers. Hamburgers are American in origin, though it's uncertain whether they were in the 19th or 20th century. We won't fret over when they were first created. We'll just savor the flavor.
Yep.
Do you guys remember the old Popeye cartoon and Wimpy?
Wimpy,
Yep,
yes.
Wimpy.
That's right. I'll gladly pay
give you
you
Tuesday
for a hamburger today.
Yes, for sure. Well, today we're going to be talking about some interesting military equipment. A recent article in Mental Floss by a fellow named Tony Donnell detailed some very strange weapons that were developed during World War II. As Mr. Donnell states, necessity is the mother of invention, and World War II was certainly a time of need. Of course, a lot of these inventions are well known, such as the atomic bomb, the B-17 Flying Fortress, the British Spitfire fighter plane, synthetic rubber, the Jeep, and even duct tape all helped the Allies to win the war. However, some of the inventions that came about during World War II were, well, let's just say not quite as successful, and some of them were downright weird.
That's right.
Now, we here at Remnant Stew know that's what our listeners have come to expect from us, the bizarre and strange. So without further ado, let's jump off into some of the weirdest war machines ever developed. Now, Juliet, you'll be glad to know this first one comes from England. So
maybe she can help you say it, too,
yes,
because this
that
is
might
a
be
very
the case.
strange word.
It's called, it's Panjandrum. I'm going to say Panjandrum.
Panjandrum.
Oh, okay.
Panjandrum.
I like the way you said it
I have
better.
no idea.
It was good.
We'll go with that. In the months leading up to the D-Day landings, which occurred in June of 1944, the British Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development.
Now that's a title.
I'd love that
That would be
name.
awesome.
I love that department. The DMWD. I want to say it again. The British Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development was tasked with developing a weapon that could penetrate the concrete defenses of Hitler's fortress Europe, which was an extensive system of Nazi coastal fortifications. So they came up with the Panjandrum, an enormous device with two wheels connected to a drum-like axle with rockets on the wheels to propel it forward. The axle drum was packed with explosives. Now, this sounds like something that Wile E. Coyote might have dreamed up, I'm thinking. In fact, I wonder if maybe the DWMD might have become the Acme Company after the war. But
I was
anyway.
going to ask.
The idea was that it would be propelled against enemy defenses, exploding on contact, and blasting a gap big enough for a tank to drive through. Sounds like a great idea, right? Well, there was a lot of excitement on the day that they decided to test it out. Quoting from Mr. Donnell's article, when it was tested on an otherwise peaceful English beach, things didn't go quite as planned. The 70 slow-burning cordite rockets attached to the two 10-foot steel wheels sparked into action, and for about 20 seconds it was quite impressive. That is, until the rockets started to dislodge and fly off in all directions.
This sounds like a Wile E. Coyote
Right, exactly.
Cartoon.
Sending a dog chasing after one and generals running for cover. The rest was sheer chaos as the Panjandrum charged around the beach completely out of control. Unsurprisingly, the Panjandrum never saw battle. Kind
I
of a
see
shame.
men running from it, screaming. That's great.
Well, now here's another one though. The Germans had their own interesting machinery. Soon after the German army took over Paris in 1940, they found a strange remote-controlled vehicle that had been dumped in the Seine River by a French inventor in an effort to conceal it. This discovery inspired the Germans to come up with their own remote-controlled vehicle, primarily for use as an anti-tank weapon. The result was the Goliath tracked mine, which was 1 foot tall and 4 feet long.
Goliath. It was
Goliath.
1 foot tall. Okay.
Right.
Maybe they didn't understand what that word meant.
Perhaps not. But maybe they thought the impact would be Goliath in nature. But anyway, 1 foot tall, 4 feet long, and it had tracks like those of a tank. It was designed to carry over 100 pounds of TNT. The idea was that it could be steered remotely and driven under enemy tanks and then detonated. But there were some drawbacks. The primary problem was that the remote connection was achieved by a 2,000-foot extension cord.
Yep. Drive-by wire.
Right, for sure.
Oh, no. That's okay.
Which unreeled out of the rear of the chassis. Allied soldiers, who nicknamed the devices doodlebugs, quickly discovered that all they had to do was cut the cord and the vehicle was immobilized.
Because they couldn't foresee that happening?
Darn, we didn't think of that. How
I
did
hoped
they
it
come up
would
with
be
that idea?
faster, not slower.
It also had an extremely low ground clearance and would often get stuck and was very slow. Nevertheless, the Germans produced 7,564 of these Goliaths, and they attempted to use them in several battles, but with little success. Now, there's a really nifty YouTube video showing some American soldiers playing with a couple of catcher doodlebugs. If you just go to YouTube and type in American soldiers playing with doodlebug, you'll see it. It's worth looking at.
Well, and I'll post it to our Facebook page. I'll put a link on our Facebook page.
Outstanding.
Just throw that in a catapult and check it back.
Now, in one of our previous episodes called Four-Legged Soldiers, we talk about the UK's failed attempt to use exploding rats as a World War II weapon against Germany. and Project X-Ray, America's aborted attempt to use exploding bats as a bomb before changing tactics. Those were both great inventions. Actually, the exploding bats didn't work out so well. The exploding rats were captured, if I remember right, but the Germans were worried about more exploding rats, so in effect that one did work.
So it did work, but just by
not the way the Brits thought that
right.
would work, but it did work. That the Germans were afraid about looking for rats all the time. Well, those weren't the only animals roped into World War II military plans. The ability to successfully aim missiles was a major concern during the war, and much brain power was devoted to the task. One possible solution came from B.F. Skinner. Yes, if you ever studied a psychology class, you've heard of B.F. Skinner, haven't you? You've probably heard he was a respected psychologist and an inventor who believed in the power of pigeons. You may be familiar with the Skinner box, in which Skinner trained pigeons and other animals to pull levers and conduct other tasks as part of his psychological research. Despite some doubts from the National Research Defense Committee, they nonetheless decided to give Skinner $25,000 for the development of his idea, codenamed Project Pigeon. Now, first of all...
wait.
That's right. Aren't code names supposed to be like, in code?
Disguise what it is that you're supposed to do. Like the bat bomb was Project X-Ray. That was a cool code name. But there's no Project Pigeon. Not so cool.
Yeah, you chose Pigeon. You're not getting any cooler cool name.
Right. Skinner built a nose cone that housed 3 kamikaze pigeon cockpits.
Oh, poor babies.
Each pigeon sat in front of a tiny electronic screen that projected an image of the ground below. The pigeons were then trained to recognize a target, and upon seeing it, would peck the screen. When all 3 pecked together, cables attached to their head would adjust the missile's flight path and guide it to the target. As bizarre as all this sounds, a successful demonstration was carried out. In 1944, however, the still skeptical research committee terminated the project without any of the pigeons actually seeing combat. It's kind of disappointing.
Well, they wouldn't have seen it.
It sounds like a Disney movie.
Yeah, Yankee Doodle Pigeon, I think that was what the code name should have been.
And just as a side note, did you know that Skinner boxes? That's a term. It's a psychology.
Right.
In psychology, Skinner did not want those boxes named after him. I mean, and I don't think it was because it was a negative connotation or anything. Which today it kind of is because it was electrified on the bottom, and we're a whole lot more humane.
Cruel to the animals,
right?
I think,
we're a lot more humane minded these days. He just was humble, and he didn't want he just wanted the boxes.
Want the credit.
Yeah, he didn't want the credit. He didn't want the boxes to have his name. So.
He wanted to be for the benefit of posterity, I suppose.
That's right.
Well, now here's another good British invention. I like this one. It's called the Hofner Rota buggy. This was a British experimental vehicle, which is basically a Willys Jeep with a small set of helicopter blades attached to it. Now, a Jeep with helicopter blades, now we're really talking, I think.
Well, why not?
I would love that.
Built in 1942, the idea was to develop a vehicle that could be quickly transported from one place to another. However, it required 2 pilots to operate it, one while it was on the ground and the other for flight.
Why? Because the guy that could fly it couldn't drive it?
Well, I guess you had to change seats. Otherwise,
But how cool would that be to go down the freeway and then if you get into a traffic jam, you just take off.
Switch over.
I think it'd be great. Well, it says that the project was abandoned with the development of vehicle-carrying gliders. Now, wait a minute. They had vehicle-carrying gliders? I've never heard that before.
I had no idea. Now, listen, I think there's a whole lot out there that we're not made aware of.
Right.
And the military's always, figuring things out.
Yeah, military-carrying gliders. That's a pretty cool one.
But we have a picture of one of these Jeeps.
Now, what could be more practical than an aircraft carrier made out of ice?
Oh, because,
taking off with the propeller plane's not a problem. You put a jet on that.
Right.
You get 2 takeoffs. Then we have to re-ice it.
Well, there's probably a lot that was more practical than that. That didn't stand in the way of the British researcher, Geoffrey Pike. Now, how would you pronounce that name? I say
That's
Geoffrey.
Pike.
Geoffrey, but it's spelled with a G. Geoffrey. Geoffrey. Geoffrey Pike, as a German U-2 submarine menace was plaguing transatlantic supply ships during World War II, it was found that aerial bombers were very efficient at destroying surface subs. However, these bombers didn't have the range to cover the entire ocean. What was needed was an aircraft landing platform in the middle of the ocean. With a shortage of aluminum and steel, Pike decided that ice was the perfect answer. He decided to strengthen the ice by mixing it with a 14% solution that included sawdust and wood chips. So that sounds like it would work, doesn't it?
I'm thinking it's going to leave a trail like of
of sawdust and wood
right?
chips, perhaps. Yes. The new strengthened frozen material was dubbed Pikecrete. You see what he did there,
yeah.
Jeffrey was not like Skinner. He wanted it named after himself. Anyway, a small prototype was built at Patricia Lake in Alberta, Canada. An extensive and expensive cooling system was incorporated to prevent the ice from melting. In 1943, however, the project was abandoned due to the enormous cost of refrigerant needed to keep it intact and afloat. That's kind of a shame. There's a really cool picture of it, though. I think
yes, we have.
And
it's not a picture of the actual one. It's an illustration of it.
An artist illustration of what it could have looked like.
And I'm
awesome.
guessing nothing ventured, nothing gained, but I'm still thinking that you could have foreseen this being a bomb, or, it just not taken off real well.
That's true.
Or taken off from.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
Now, you've all seen cannons, right? And kind of have an idea of what they would look like.
Yes.
But have you ever seen a cannon with a 430-foot barrel? Well, probably not.
I'm thinking it's a little impractical, but...
It was actually known as the V3. This cannon was not intended to be mobile. I would think not,
Sharp corners would have been a problem.
Exactly. During World War II, Germany, in retaliation for continued Allied air raids, decided to build a gigantic cannon along the coast of France, pointed in the general direction of London.
Why not?
Now, the barrel of the cannon...
Wait, that's so Monty.
It's a little to the left. No, you're left.
I'm going to shoot in your general direction.
The barrel of the cannon was 430 feet long. It was designed in such a way that when a shell was fired from the tail end of the barrel, secondary propellants were charged within the barrel as the shell passed by them. This was to help the shell travel the 100 miles from Calais to London. The cannon was never fired as Allied bombers destroyed it before completion in a bomb. It doesn't seem fair, does it?
Man, just give them one shot.
At least see if it worked, And by the way, they destroyed it by using deep penetrating tall boy bombs, each of which weighed 11,900 pounds. Seems like kind of overkill.
Wow.
So they dropped a Panjandrum without the wheels.
Exactly. A smaller version of the cannon was used by Germany later in the war as the Allies were approaching the Rhine River. However, it proved to be ineffective as aiming the cannon was imprecise.
Yeah, so at this end, you move it an inch and it moves off target a mile.
By the time we move the other end, the blasted enemy has moved.
Pivot.
Now, this was another good one. The sticky grenade.
Yeah, this is hilarious.
The sticky grenade was yet another of the outlandish weapons devised by the British during World War II. To use the weapon, soldiers would release a pin that removed the grenade's protective casing, revealing a sticky surface on the weapon that could be used to attach to enemy tanks. Though the explosives board disapproved of the idea, Winston Churchill was a big fan, and so over the course of the war, 2.5 million sticky bombs were produced and used in North Africa, Greece, and in other locales. Unfortunately, the sticky bombs had a number of design flaws. The grenades often failed to stick to the tanks, especially if the tanks were dirty.
Yeah, they're kind of dirty out there.
Yeah, they tend to get dirty and they wouldn't stick to them. However, they did tend to cling to soldiers' hands and uniforms.
See, I'm just kind of trying to shake it off.
Where's duct tape when you need it?
We're back to Wile E. Coyote here again, I think. The likely hair raising in the 5 seconds before the fuse detonated.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
Well, today's oddity. There's very little humor in the COVID pandemic that's been plaguing the world recently.
Well, it's high time we had some, I say.
So, something funny recently happened to a British journalist. We've mentioned before that we record the Remnant Stew episodes well in advance of their release, and currently in February 2021, because I'm hoping by the time this is released in late May, it'll all be over.
And we're not just picking on the Brits today because you're here.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
But it coincidence? Does make it fun, though.
But, okay, so in February, people right now are receiving the COVID vaccination, but the medical community is prioritizing certain people to give the vaccine to first.
Right.
So these would be the elderly, those who are immune compromised or have issues with their lungs. So Liam Thorpe, a political editor of the Liverpool Echo, was surprised when he got the notice from the National Health Service that he needed to come in for a COVID vaccine.
You mean he's not elderly or impaired in another way?
No, 32 years old with no underlying health conditions. But he didn't hesitate to make an appointment. He thought, it's important. Let's do it.
Get it, yeah.
But then he started wondering why he had been chosen and put on the list. Have you heard this?
No.
No, you have. Oh, you were nodding your head. I was thinking maybe you'd heard it. So he said that, quote, I report on the COVID situation every day, so I'm well aware of how far back in the queue I rightly should be. So Thorpe called his doctor to ask about the situation and was informed that he was placed on the list because of his weight problem.
Weight problem.
And this is all coming to light through his tweets. He's tweeting about this.
Right.
So he tweeted, I put on a few pounds in the lockdown, but not that many.
Right.
Turns out that over a year ago when Liam Thorpe registered with this particular doctor's office, a mistake was made when recording his height. So they had his weight right.
Right.
But he says, he quotes, they had my height at 6.2 centimeters rather than 6'2" inches, giving him a body mass index of 28,000.
Oh, yeah.
So for reference, any BMI number over 40 is considered quite chunky.
Yeah, I would think 28,000 would be pushing the limit, don't you think?
And so the guy that called him back from the doctor's office was so apologetic. But Thorpe just found it very funny. And so he's tweeting all of this. And he also says, when I told my mom that I had classed in the clinically obese category, she said, well, perhaps this is the wake-up call you need.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
And now back to our regularly scheduled chinwag.
Let's break away from World War II and look at weird devices from other points in history. This comes to us from livescience.com. Now more to modern warfare. How about the robot dog developed by Boston Dynamics? Now we've switched. We're going to leave the British alone for a little bit and talk about our own country's inventions. The big dog, as they call it, is a four-legged robot weighing over 200 pounds. The main purpose of this robot is to carry 100-pound loads into the mountainous terrain so that soldiers don't have to. What, they don't have mules anymore? The Army's used mules forever. I don't know.
I guess you don't have to feed a robot
Maybe
dog.
that's the case, yeah.
And we have a picture of it, and it looks to me more like a horse.
Yeah.
A little bit, but anyway.
Maybe robot horse would be a better name anyway. However, upon testing in Afghanistan, it was found that the robot was rather slow and also made a lot of noise. That's not really something you want when you're trying to sneak around behind the lines. One soldier was quoted as saying, "It sounds like a swarm of bees." The noise factor has prevented the military from putting the big dog into current use. So maybe they can get the noise down a little bit. Now, here's a good one. The chicken nuclear weapon.
All right.
This is not those things you get and put in the microwave. But no, not the frozen kind of nuggets. But during the height of the Cold War, the British, we're picking on the British again. The British came up with an 8-ton nuclear weapon called the Blue Peacock. It was a massive nuclear mine to be placed in Germany that could be detonated if the Soviets decided to invade from the east. There was a problem, however. In Germany, the ground gets very cold during the winter, making it hard for all of the equipment in the mine to work. Not to be stumped by a little cold weather, the Brits came up with an idea of heating the nuke with live chickens. That's right, live chickens would be encased in a shell and given enough food, water, and oxygen to survive. The heat generated by the chickens would keep the project warm enough to function. What could go wrong?
Oh, yeah. Chicken wings.
Right. Ultimately, the plan was scrapped because of the risk of nuclear fallout, according to the BBC.
Oh,
but,
wow.
I just like the idea of using chickens in a nuke somehow.
Well, I know that greenhouses use rabbits to keep it warm in there. Well,
the same premise. The same premise should work.
They stink.
Now, back to our own country. Our good friends down at the CIA came up with this idea.
Of course they did.
At the height of the Cold War. Why go to all the trouble of actually killing your enemies when you can just send them on a groovy trip instead? Dubbed the BZ bomb, it was also known as the LSD bomb.
Oh, nice.
Just lick it.
This was an artillery shell that was laced with the hallucinogen this is going to be too hard for me to say.
We could just say LSD. Everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, just say LSD. 3-quinaclidinol benzylate. That
LSD.
was botched up pretty badly. I dropped a clanger there, didn't I? Anyway, one Army recruit who was exposed to the BZ bomb described experiencing some bizarre dreams, as well as feeling restless, having trouble focusing, and suffering and headaches. And he was also overcome with an insatiable desire to play bongo drums and listen to the sitar music.
And what, eat some brownies?
Anyway, the CIA dropped the idea.
Yeah, they did. Dropped it like acid.
For sure.
Ouch, that was mine.
Now for today's bookshop spot, the part of the show where we take you on a virtual tour of one of the most magical of places, an independent bookshop.
So this bookshop is called Fiction Addiction, which I really like.
That's a great name, Fiction Addiction.
It's at 1175 Woods Crossing Road in Greenville, South Carolina.
Nice.
Owned by Jill Hendricks. This bookstore started as a used bookstore in 2001, and they slowly added new books over time. And then when the city's largest indie bookstore closed in 2010, Fiction Addiction stepped into their shoes to add author events and have since converted to a completely new bookstore, so no more used books. They've changed locations 3 times over the years, and the most recent was during the pandemic when they just moved a few doors down within the same shopping center.
Right.
Jill says that their biggest claim to fame is that they have hosted Nicholas Sparks. Do y'all know, like,
Nicholas
the Notebook?
Sparks, yeah.
Right.
All right. Oh, that's pretty cool.
They've had him for 5 book signings.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Including a socially distanced one in the fall of 2020. Jill says we're very lucky Sparks has close ties to the area. He was actually living in a suburb of Greenville when he wrote the Notebook, and he's given them so much support, and she's so appreciative. She says getting a mega best-selling author like Nicholas Sparks can really help an independent bookstore stay in business.
That's a very popular book, very popular movie, so that sounds like a really great deal there.
And then she says that the store did, at one time, have a resident cat. It was named Miles Vorkatigan, after Louis McMaster Bujold. It's a Bujold. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, character. The cat was a fixture at the original store location. He was even written up in the paper for his love of lollipops.
Like a cat loving lollipop.
And how he'd wave at
There's
customers.
a joke there somewhere. I'm not sure where it is. But
he would wave at customers to get a treat. That cat had it made.
That's
going.
a great cat.
But he retired to Jill's mom's house when the store last changed locations and has since passed on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, he had a good run.
So you can find Fiction Addiction Bookstore on Facebook or at their website at fiction-addiction.com.
And now for something really smashing.
Okay, so going all the way back to the Civil War, we're hopping all over the historical timeline today.
That's right.
In our very first episode of Remnant Stew called Balloonacy, we talked about how hot air balloons were used in the Civil War for reconnaissance purposes.
Right.
It's a little problematic, though, because the guy in the balloon would have to, in order to see anything of note, would have to lower the balloon into shooting range.
Right.
And so a lot of those balloons were shot down. But hot air balloons do seem to be very on par with the times when you think of the 1860s, right? Well, what about submarines?
Now, submarines in the 1860s, that seems kind of strange.
It does seem strange. This episode, though, is called Submarines and War Machines.
Well, we wouldn't lie about a thing like that.
And we brought you a plethora of bizarre war machines. So now it's time for stories about submarines, as promised. And what's more bizarre than a Civil War-era submarine? There was an arms race during the Civil War in which each side tried to develop the first working submarine. The Confederacy was at a naval disadvantage because the Union controlled, all of the Navy's vessels and swelled its Navy fleet from 90 warships to over 6,000 in the short space of time between 1861 and 1865. So in 4 years, that's huge. So the South was scrambling to build a very modest Navy from scratch, and they understood that they were just immensely outnumbered. So they began attempts at constructing a submarine that would scuttle the ships of the North. So if you can't,
an equalizer.
The great equalizer. The Pioneer was the prototype being built in secret down in New Orleans. But fate would doom the vessel well before it ever saw battle. Horace Lawson Hunley, a former deputy collector of customs in New Orleans and state legislator in Louisiana, was the man in charge of the naval efforts. He commanded the Pioneer to be sunk by his own team of naval engineers when the city of New Orleans was captured by Union troops in 1862. So they went to all that effort and then ended up having to sink it. Quoting from an article in BusinessInsider.com, a second attempt, the American Diver, was built in Mobile, Alabama, but sank while being towed. Finally,
kind of ruin your day right there.
Right? So finally, in July 1863, Hunley successfully launched his third submarine, which would eventually be named after him. So it's the Hunley submarine.
Right.
This submarine was powered by 8 men standing side by side in line and turning a hand crank, kind of like the crankshaft of a car.
Okay.
That would then turn the propeller on the back.
So, 8 guys turning a crank to make,
just like
under the water to make...
just to make it go.
Make it go, okay.
So, and the submarine was sent to Charleston, where the man in charge of the city's defense, and I love this name, it's such a Southern name, General P.G.T. Beauregard.
Beauregard.
He was very eager to send it into battle.
Oh, yeah. Get them ships out of here.
That's right. Well, the ship wasn't ready and actually sunk twice during training missions, killing 13 men, including Hunley. But General Beauregard was not to be deterred. And the Hunley submarine was fitted with a spar torpedo. BusinessInsider.com says the torpedo, a 16-foot pole with a 135-pound explosive at the end of it, was attached to the lower bow at a 45-degree angle and would be detonated on contact or by a trigger-pulled device.
So, that sounds complicated.
Okay.
Well, it sounds dangerous is what it sounds like.
First of all, I'm wondering, how are they breathing under there? I mean, in 1860.
You know what? I really don't know. But they were, it was successful going down and moving around and all of this kind of stuff. But after months of training, Dixon and his men were ready. Dixon was the captain of the ship. Were ready and waiting for a night with good weather. Their moment came on February 17th. They left their base on Sullivan's Island and began their attack on the USS Housatonic at 8:45 p.m. The small arms fire failed to stop the Hunley, and its torpedo detonated shortly after it made contact near the rear of the sloop. The massive explosion tore a huge hole in the ship and instantly killed 5 sailors aboard the Housatonic. Within 5 minutes, the ship sank. The rest of the crew survived by escaping in 2 lifeboats or by climbing the masts, which remained above the water until they could be rescued. So this little hand-powered Civil War sub, the Hunley, made history as being the first submarine to sink an enemy ship. It sailed proudly away from the site of its victory, or so everyone imagined, but it never actually made it back to port, the mystery of what happened to the submarine and crew remained a mystery for well over 100 years.
Oh, yes. I remember hearing about this now.
Okay, so in 1995, a search party found the little sub, and in the year 2000, it was raised from the sea and placed in a tank for display at the Warren Lash Conservation Center there in Charleston, South Carolina. Not only did they find the ship, they also found the crew. The skeletal remains of all 8 crewmen were still found at their stations and with no broken bones.
Really?
There were also no holes found in the vessel except for the ones corroded by time in the water. So there were no holes blown into the submarine. So it was really a mystery of what happened to it and what killed the men.
Right.
There was an extensive investigation determined that the crew were all killed by the shock wave of the initial torpedo blast.
Really?
Modern torpedoes, as you've seen in movies or whatever, they're shot away from the boat, well away from the boat. But the Hunley's torpedo was essentially at the end of a pole, just extending out from in front of the sub, and apparently the pole wasn't quite long enough.
Right.
The good news is that the death was probably instant.
So it was shockwaves that killed them.
That's right. So there was no indication that anyone survived the blast. They didn't move from their stations, or anything. There wasn't a whole lot of room to move from, but they were still right there. With its crew dead and no one to turn the hand crank, the Hunley sank slowly to the seabed. The crew of the Housatonic, the Union boat torpedoed by the sub, actually fared better with only a loss of 5 lives to the Hunley's 8. But then you also have to consider the 13 men that died at,
training
with it.
I wonder how they got more volunteers after those first 13 died, Wow. But it was at least the first, and they noted as the first successful submarine attack.
That's right.
Interesting.
So speaking of submarines.
And we are.
Usually, this is a funny story. I love this story. Usually submarines just have holding tanks that store any waste until they can make it back to shore. But during World War II, Nazis, rather than keeping their waste on board, and we're not talking about, paper, trash, or anything like that. We're talking about human waste.
Human waste, okay.
Instead of keeping their waste on board, developed a way for it to be discharged directly into the water.
Yeah, they were not nice people.
They were not nice people.
That doesn't sound sanitary.
Initially, this required the sub to float up near the surface, but that's pretty dangerous to do in wartime. So as the war continued, technology allowed them to be able to dump into deep water.
A deep water dump, okay.
And this was accomplished
different flushing
by a toilet with a series of highly pressured chambers and airlocks that jettisoned the waste out into the sea just like a poop torpedo.
Ooh. Wow.
And operating this newfangled toilet was a much more complicated process than before. So this is so funny. So every submarine that had one of these also had a man on board trained specifically on how to operate that toilet.
Flushing automator.
Well, operator. I'm thinking Rear Admiral.
Yeah, that would be.
So the German U-boat U-1206 was one of these new submarines with a special toilet, and in April 1945 it was running missions in the North Sea when its captain needed to use the head. Now this captain, I'm not making this up, Captain Karl Adolf Schlitt had no idea how to flush the newfangled toilet and called this poor engineer in to help him figure it out. A misunderstanding ensued and resulted in the engineer opening the wrong valve. And this is a big no-no on a submarine.
Oh, no.
You never want to open the wrong valve. Uh-huh. Seawater and sewage flooded into the compartment and then began to stream down into the sub's giant internal batteries located directly beneath the bathroom. Because, that's a good place to put it.
That's a good place to put it. That's a good, smart design.
He's trained to do this.
Yeah.
So when it came into contact with the batteries, a reaction occurred that produced toxic chlorine gas. Captain Schlitt had no other choice than to order the sub to the surface where they could flush out the poisonous gas.
I see what you did there.
It's a good thing the captain had already done his business, because once the submarine surfaced, it was immediately spotted by British planes and attacked, rendering it unable to dive.
Flatulence.
The crew abandoned ship and scuttled the U-boat while they made a dash in their lifeboats to the Scottish shore. Only 3 crew members were killed. The rest, including Captain Schlitt and hopefully the Rear Admiral as well,
hopefully survived. Right.
Survived the war, which ended only a few weeks later.
They should have a decoration for that, I would think. Maybe not the Iron Cross, but the Iron...
he made a huge mistake.
The Iron Head. Okay.
The German sub U-1206 remains to this day full of water and Captain Schlitt's waste at the bottom of the North Sea.
And there it shall stay.
He was dethroned.
Wow. Well... That's a great story. Now, going back to the United States, this was a fairly recent announcement this was a press release by the United States Army from, let's see, am I saying this right? Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey, June 21st, 2012. Scientists and engineers at Picatinny Arsenal are busy developing a device that will shoot lightning bolts down laser beams to destroy targets. Soldiers and science fiction fans, you are welcome.
Woohoo!
This is a quote from one of the researchers there. He said, "We never get tired of the lightning bolts zapping into simulated targets," said George Fisher, lead scientist on the project. The laser-induced plasma channel, or the LIPC, is designed to take out targets that conduct electricity better than the air or ground that surrounds them. So
I'm not sure I understand what's going on.
There's a plasma channel, and they're shooting a lightning bolt down a plasma channel to zap something.
Okay, a plasma channel. I'm going to have to Google that one.
Well, we've seen a lot of really interesting submarines and war machine stories, but we've kind of saved our favorite for last. It's kind of our typical way of going. And I really like this one, and we're going back 300 years for this one. It's called the Puckle Gun.
The Puckle Gun.
Puckle Gun was patented by lawyer James Puckle in England. There we go again. Sorry, Juliet. In 1718. This gun fired square bullets instead of round ones. You see, Mr. Couple... I'm sorry, I said it wrong.
Because we're going to knock your block off?
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny.
Anyway, Mr. Puckle felt that square bullets would inflict more pain. It's not known how he came to this determination. Whether targeting, which is more painful, you tell me. According to the patent, I love this, the point of the square bullets was to, quote, convince the Turks of the benefits of Christian civilization.
Oh, because, that
you can't beat
so
sound
well.
reasoning like that. No. I can imagine him shouting over at the Turks, we're going to Christianize you lot by firing square bullets in your general direction. The Puckle gun, which could fire 9 bullets per minute, was the world's first machine gun, according to Historic UK, but it was never picked up by the British military because its firing mechanism proved to be unreliable. And that's too bad. I think rather than telling people that you got shot, it would be a lot more fun to tell them that you got puckled.
Puckle up.
Oh, my.
And now it's time, boys and girls, for the Trivia Challenge.
So, now to participate in our Trivia Challenge, we've said the rules before, but we'll say them again here. Like and follow our Facebook page at Remnant Stew Podcast. Like and share this episode post. Put your answer to the Trivia Challenge question in the comments of that post. First person to do all that will be the winner and will be mentioned in a future episode of Remnant Stew, and will have ever our adoration and praise.
And I just have to say, this question is one of the first ones that Harbin Gould is now providing. He's our Trivia Challenge.
We couldn't beat him, so he's joined us.
That's
so
right.
Good luck, everyone else.
So here's the question. What does your pet, the Japanese Army Air Service, and 1347 Sicily have in common?
Oh, that's
Wait, can we answer or are we excused?
Remnant Stew is created by me, Leah Lamp. Dr. Stephen Meeker and I research, write, and host each episode. Judy Meeker works behind the scenes, helping with research and our bookshop spots. Audio and random dad jokes and just bad jokes are produced by Philip Sinquefield.
You're welcome.
Special thanks to Harbin Gould for our Trivia Challenge questions. You can connect with us through our Facebook and Instagram or through our email at staycurious@remnantstew.com. Reach out and say hi or tell us about a topic you'd like to hear us cover in an upcoming episode. We love to hear from you.
Now, before you go, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss an episode. Please take the time to give us a review on iTunes. There's a convenient link on our website to make it easy for you. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, family, commanding officer, ship captain, and rear admiral. And until next time, in these unprecedented times, please choose to be kind and always stay curious.